Here is Bernie Sanders speaking about U.S. foreign policy in Latin America. One of my favorite parts of the 2016 election was there was one debate where he basically said, Henry Kissinger is not my friend. And he basically said stuff on a debate stage that I don't know that we'd ever heard any American president say. Certainly no one who was in top contention. But even marginal figures in the past, marginal in terms of how much support they had, in part because they had so little time to talk, they never got around to saying these type of things that Bernie Sanders had said on that debate stage. And he is maintaining that theme here in Las Vegas.
That is, all of you know that the history of the United States' relationship to Latin America has been, to say paternalistic would be an understatement. All right, the so-called Monroe Doctrine. You're all familiar with the Monroe Doctrine. And what it said is, it's a great doctrine if you're in the United States, which says the United States has the right to intervene in any country around the world, in Latin America. So back in the 1970s, the United States, Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, overthrew the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende because he was a threat to the corporate interest in this country. All right, overthrowing governments in Brazil, overthrown governments in the Dominican Republic, supported terrible people in El Salvador, which resulted in God knows how many murders and deaths. So what we need is a foreign policy in which the United States respects the independence of countries in Latin America and in Mexico. We work together to improve the standard of living of all of our people. I voted against NAFTA.
There you go. There's Bernie Sanders basically, on the campaign trail, taking up issues that, frankly, I don't think that Bernie Sanders, if he did not address these things, it would inhibit his popularity at all. Maybe on the contrary, but super important for people to understand the context of what things are happening in the world today that are in the sphere of influence of the United States, which largely is, in many respects, we influence stuff all around the world, for better or for worse. Why we have things like tens of thousands of children who their parents are willing to send to the United States to seek safety, largely because we destroyed the nascent civil structures of many of these countries. We undermined them such that ultimately this is the natural progression. I mean, to a certain extent, that's also like why you need to have things like impeachment if it's quite obvious that your president is corrupt. Because over time, if you do not nurture these institutions that maintain the rule of law, you start getting stuff like we develop, you turn into a narco state. I think I would imagine that part of the reason why a certain percentage of Hispanic immigrants in this country who come from some of these Latin American countries, why there is a culture of that in which there is less fervor to vote amongst Hispanics than maybe other groups, is in part a function of like, we vote for people who give us some material benefit, and then 2 years later, they're ousted in a military coup that the United States or whomever, applauds.
Oh, well, there is also, unfortunately, a pretty powerful faction or group of Hispanic immigrants who come from the ruling class of their respective nations and will certainly not look kindly upon any Democratic candidate who talks this kind of anti-imperial talk that Bernie's
without a
doing.
doubt. I think those people are already voting for the Republicans.
We love Latinos.
Probably.
My understanding, and I got a buddy who's actually someone I went to college with who is a radio host, big radio host in that world. And he told me that Trump got 30% of the Hispanic vote. If he gets 25%, he can't win. And
I think Bernie just saying this, I think a problem Democrats have just as a brand is that the Republicans have been this menace for like decades now. And the Democrats sort of have taken this tact where they have to be kind of disingenuous about that, where they have like, we can work with these people a little bit sort of thing. And just being forthright about what we're actually up against. I mean, I think there's a lot of people that know, one, the GOP is a menace, and two, like our foreign policy in places is complete, well, I guess he called it like patriarchal and authoritarian. And I think people just like to see that, coming out of a politician's mouth.
Yep, it's helpful to drop a little bit of truth.
And Bernie's the only one who's doing that right now.
That's true.